Hello, everyone. Nice to see you again in today's story. I would like to introduce to you an ancient story. Now I invite you to listen to this story. Hey guys, tonight we are diving headfirst into a story so vast, so ancient, it makes the pyramids look like they were built last Tuesday. We're journeying beyond our familiar blue skies, past the Kuiper Belt, and into the realm of the Anunnaki, the supposed gods from planet Nibiru, the alleged architects of humankind. Imagine, just for a moment, you're not tucked into bed, but standing on a world lit by a distant, fading sun, the air thin, the ground trembling with the last gasps of a dying planet. This isn't just a bedtime story. It's a plunge into the abyss of what if. And honestly, you probably won't survive this cosmic drama without questioning a few things you thought you knew about our origins, maybe even misplacing your car keys in the ensuing existential days. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to see where you're all tuning in from tonight, so drop your city or country and the local time in the comments below. It's always a thrill to see our little community stretching across the globe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing on Nibiru. Or more accurately, you feel yourself there. The ground beneath your feet has a strange, almost metallic coolness, and when you look up, the sky isn't the comforting blue you know. It's a bruised purple, tinged with an unsettling orange glow at the horizon, like a perpetual, sorrowful sunset. The air is thin, so thin you'd be gasping if you were truly breathing it, and carries a faint scent of ozone and something else, something like regret. This isn't a new problem for the beings here. It's the crescendo of a long, slow decay. Their world, their magnificent ancient Nibiru, is losing its breath. Around you, figures move with a grace that belies their stature. They are tall, these Nibiruns, the Anunnaki as they call themselves, with features that seem sculpted from moonlight and shadow. Their eyes, often described as luminous, now carry a heavy weight, the reflection of a dying star and a dying hope. For generations, they have watched their atmosphere bleed away into the void, a precious shield against the harsh cosmic radiation of their elongated orbit. Historians still argue whether ancient tales of sky battles between gods might actually be garbled accounts of Nibiruan atmospheric phenomena, or even their desperate, early attempts at planetary engineering. Whatever the case, their advanced science, which once built cities that pierced the troubled skies and vessels that dance between moons, now fights a losing battle against planetary entropy. Their atmospheric shield is thinning faster than a celebrity's denial in a scandal, and their scientists are running out of quick fixes. They've tried everything from atmospheric reionizers to gigantic space umbrellas. Okay, maybe not umbrellas, but probably something equally desperate sounding in their own highly advanced language. In vast, echoing council chambers, lit by softly pulsing crystals, the wisest among them deliberate. You can almost hear the murmur of their deep voices, the subtle clinking of ceremonial attire, the tension so thick you could spread it on toast. Projections flicker in the air, complex equations and simulations painting grim futures. They've considered migrating, of course, but to where? And how to move an entire civilization, their history, their very essence, across the unfathomable gulfs of space. Then a glimmer of hope, a theory whispered in hushed tones, then proclaimed with cautious optimism, gold. Not for its beauty, not for currency as your Earth cultures would later obsess over, but for its unique properties. Finely powdered, suspended in their upper atmosphere, gold particles could reflect sunlight, stabilize their deteriorating shield, and buy them precious time. It's the ultimate planetary sunscreen, if you will. The problem? Nibiru, for all its ancient majesty, has been mined clean of its accessible gold. Their ancestors, in their golden age, used it lavishly, never imagining a day like this. Their planet, you see, isn't like your Earth, content with a quick, yearly lap around its star. Nibiru, according to the lore we're exploring, travels on a vast, elliptical orbit, taking roughly 3,600 of your Earth years, a single year, to complete one passage through the solar system. This long journey takes them far out into the cold, dark depths of space, making that atmospheric shield absolutely critical. And now, as they once again approach the inner solar system, their atmospheric crisis is reaching a terrifying peak. It's a cosmic irony. The very system that might hold their salvation is also the one whose radiation will batter their denuded world. The decision hangs heavy in the air, heavier than a forgotten fruitcake at the back of the fridge. To send an expedition. A long, perilous journey to another world. A world rumored to possess the vital element Earth. Yes, your Earth. Back then, a primitive, untamed jewel, teeming with life but not, as far as they knew, with sentient competition of their caliber. It's a desperate gamble. They'd be sending their best and brightest, their most skilled pilots and engineers, on a one-way trip, potentially, with no guarantee of success. Imagine the briefing. Right, team, we need you to pop over to the third rock from that rather average yellow star. It's a bit of a fixer-upper, probably smells a bit damp, and you'll need to dig. A lot. Any questions? The stakes couldn't be higher. This isn't just about resource acquisition. It's about the survival of their entire race. They need gold, and they need it now. Like a sleep-deprived parent needs that first cup of coffee, only on a planetary scale. Even on your own planet, gold has held a mystical allure for millennia. The ancient Egyptians, for instance, considered gold to be the flesh of the gods, and they mined it extensively in Nubia, using techniques that, while primitive by Nibiru standards, were remarkably sophisticated for their time. They developed methods to crush quartz rock and wash away the lighter material to reveal the precious metal. This human fascination with gold, stretching back thousands of years, seems almost an echo, a faint resonance of the desperate Nibiruan need we're picturing tonight. But for the Anunnaki, it wasn't about adornment or power in the human sense. It was about literal survival, about shielding their very atmosphere. The mood on Nibiru becomes one of grim determination. Resources, already strained, are diverted to the monumental task of preparing the fleet. You see them, these beings of immense intellect and power, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and resolve. The chosen astronauts, the Anunnaki who will undertake this voyage, are revered and mourned simultaneously. They are heroes embarking on a sacred, yet terrifying quest. Families bid farewell to loved ones, not knowing if they will ever see them again, or if their world will even exist by the time a return journey could be contemplated. The weight of an entire civilization rests on their shoulders, a burden far heavier than any precious metal they hope to find. Imagine the scenes, the final checks of the great ships, designed to withstand the rigors of deep space and atmospheric entry. The Nibiruans are probably double-checking if they packed enough snacks for the journey. Intergalactic road trips are notoriously bad for catering options. The hum of powerful engines charging, a sound that reverberates through the very core of the planet. The loading of essential supplies, the archives of their knowledge, the seeds of their unique flora, just in case. This isn't just a mining expedition. It's an ark of sorts, carrying the hope of Nibiruan continuity. Their leader, Anu, the old king, watches with an ageless sorrow in his eyes. He has sanctioned this, has sent his own sons on previous, less critical missions. But this feels different. This is a tether cast into the void, hoping to snag a future. The knowledge of metallurgy on Nibiru is, of course, eons beyond what humanity would achieve for millennia. They understand the quantum structure of gold, its resonant frequencies, the precise particulate size needed for their atmospheric dispersal project. They aren't just looking for nuggets. They are looking for vast quantities that can be processed with their advanced, albeit portable technology. Their geological surveys, conducted remotely over countless stars as they pass through your solar system, have identified promising signatures on Earth, particularly in a region that will one day be known to you as Southern Africa and Mesopotamia. The calculations for the journey are mind-bogglingly complex. They must navigate asteroid fields, gravitational eddies, and the unpredictable currents of interstellar space. Their ships, marvels of Nibiruan engineering, gleam under the sickly light of their fading sun, vast, dark, and purposeful. The Nibiruans don't do things by halves. If you're going to save your planet, you don't send a dinghy, you send a fleet capable of establishing a significant operation. And so the countdown begins, not with shouted numbers, but with a deep, resonant chime that echoes across the desolate plains and through the silent, worried cities of Nibiru. Each chime marks a step closer to departure, a step closer to a desperate hope, or perhaps ultimate oblivion. The silence between the chimes is filled with unspoken prayers and the collective will of a people facing extinction. This is their only chance. The fate of Nibiru, a world older than human comprehension, hangs precariously on the success of a journey to a small, unassuming blue planet. And so, with that final resonant chime fading into the thin, mournful air of Nibiru, the great ships begin to stir. You feel it more than hear it at first, a profound vibration that shudders up from the planet's core, through the launch platforms, and into the very structure of the vessels. It's not the violent, explosive roar of your primitive chemical rockets. It's smoother, a deep thrum of immense power, like a giant purring cat, if that cat was capable of tearing a hole in space-time. Looking out from a reinforced viewport, Nibiru's surface, pocked with the lights of its struggling cities and the darkened scars of its exhausted mines, tilts and then falls away with an almost agonizing slowness. There are no cheering crowds, no triumphant broadcasts, just the silent, focused intensity of the Anunnaki crew and the heavy weight of their world hopes pressing down on them, even as gravity relinquishes its hold. The bruised purple sky gives way to the star-dusted blackness of the void, and Nibiru itself shrinks, becoming just another point of light, then a memory, then a prayer whispered into the cold dark. The journey is long, unfathomably long by any human standard. Your fastest probes, like the Voyager spacecraft launched in 1977, have taken decades just to kiss the edge of interstellar space, diligently sending back postcards from the cosmic suburbs. The Anunnaki, however, are playing a different game entirely. Their ships harness energies you can only dream of, bending space-time, perhaps, or riding on gravitational waves like cosmic surfers. Even so, the distances are colossal. You are suspended in a timeless present, the stars outside unblinking, unchanging for what feel like eons. Inside the ship, the environment is meticulously controlled. The air hums with the quiet efficiency of life support, the lighting cycles to mimic an Nibiruan day they may never see again, and the walls themselves seem to absorb sound, creating a hushed, almost reverent atmosphere. Many of the crew are in a state of controlled stasis, a deep metabolic sleep to conserve resources and pass the immense stretches of interstellar night. Imagine sleeping through a multi-millennial road trip. You'd wake up wondering if your favorite cosmic fast food chain still delivered to this quadrant, or if skinny jeans were still a thing. But some must remain awake: the navigators, the engineers, the command crew. You see them at their stations, their tall forms silhouetted against glowing consoles displaying intricate star charts and complex telemetry. Their faces are calm, but their luminous eyes reflect the endless star fields and perhaps a touch of profound loneliness. They monitor the ship's trajectory with a precision that would make a Swiss watchmaker weep with envy. Their GPS was probably a bit more sophisticated than the one that occasionally tries to send you into a lake, relying on celestial mechanics and quantum entanglement for pinpoint accuracy across galactic distances. Occasionally, a proximity alert will ripple through the ship. A rogue asteroid, tumbling through the dark like a lost thought. A comet, its tail a ghostly smear against the velvet black, passing at an immense, yet somehow still unsettling, distance. The ship's automated defense systems, or perhaps a subtle course correction from the navigators, deals with these minor inconveniences with barely a ripple. These Anunnaki are not explorers in the sense of stumbling into the unknown. They are on a targeted mission. Their destination has been calculated, their route meticulously planned based on generations of astronomical observation during Nibiru's previous passages. Yet, space is never entirely predictable. The exact nature of Nibiru's orbit and its gravitational effects on the solar system, particularly if it were to pass through the asteroid belt regularly, remains a subject of intense, if speculative, discussion among theorists, and navigating such a path in reverse is no small feat. Imagine the quiet conversations in the mess hall, if they have such a mundane thing. Or perhaps they absorb nutrients directly. Who knows? But you can picture them sharing memories of Nibiru, discussing the mission's parameters, or perhaps even engaging in philosophical debates about the ethics of their endeavor, though survival often has a way of simplifying ethics. Did they bring books? Or the Nibiruan equivalent of space Spotify? They would need something to occupy the mind during the long, silent watches between star systems. The weight of what they've left behind and the uncertainty of what lies ahead must be a constant low hum beneath the surface of their disciplined minds. Then, after an immeasurable time, a subtle shift. The stars ahead begin to resolve into a more familiar, denser cluster. They are approaching your solar system. First, a new brighter star distinguishes itself from the multitude. Sol, your sun. It's still distant, but its light is different, younger, yellower than their own fading star. It's a beacon of hope and perhaps of unforeseen dangers. As they draw closer, planets swim into view on their long-range sensors, then their visual scanners. The gas giants first, majestic and swirling, Jupiter with its great red eye, Saturn with its impossible rings. These are noted, cataloged, their gravitational influences carefully factored into the final approach. The Anunnaki are not sightseers. Every observation is data, every celestial body a potential factor in the mission's success or failure. They pass by Mars, a reddish, dusty orb, perhaps considering its potential, but its atmospheric conditions and resource profile are not what they seek for this primary objective. It's a bit of a fixer-upper, and they need something move-in ready, or at least mine-in ready. And then they see it. Earth. Suspended in the blackness, a breathtaking jewel of blue, white, and swirling green. It's vibrant, alive, radiating an energy that even their sophisticated instruments register as unique. Not a bad-looking place, a bit of a mess with all that primordial soup and volcanic activity perhaps, but it definitely had curb appeal. For beings from a dying world, it must look like paradise, a cruel irony given their purely utilitarian intentions. The mainstream historical view is that Earth's early atmosphere was a volatile mix, quite hostile to complex life as you know it, yet here it is a target for these advanced beings. Perhaps its very volatility was a sign of the geological processes that might have concentrated the goal they sought. As the ships maneuver closer, they scan for the optimal landing zones, cross-referencing their ancient survey data with current conditions. They're looking for specific geological markers for access to water, for areas that are relatively stable, at least by early Earth standards. The crew members emerging from stasis will be undergoing reacclimatization, their bodies and minds preparing for the alien environment below. There's a palpable sense of anticipation now, mixed with a healthy dose of caution. They are pioneers, yes, but they are also intruders in a world that has, until now, evolved on its own terms. The recent passage of Oumuamua through your solar system in 2017, that strange cigar-shaped interstellar object, sparked a brief, tantalizing debate about whether it could have been an alien probe. For the Anunnaki, however, there is no debate. They are the interstellar voyagers, and their arrival is imminent. The long journey is almost over. The real work, the dangerous work, is about to begin. The blue planet beckons, promising salvation or perhaps just another set of insurmountable problems. The final approach is a masterpiece of controlled descent. Imagine these colossal Nibiruan vessels, which have traversed the unimaginable emptiness between stars, now gingerly navigating Earth's upper atmosphere. You see them not as fiery meteors streaking recklessly, but as immense, dark shapes temporarily displacing the clouds, their advanced drive systems humming a tune that subtly warps gravity itself, allowing for a descent that is both swift and astonishingly gentle. No sonic booms to shatter the primordial silence, no burning debris raining down. Just a profound, almost imperceptible pressure wave announcing their arrival. The ships glow faintly, an effect of their energy fields interacting with the atmospheric gases, looking like captured aurorae as they pierce the cloud cover. From below, any primitive eyes that might have chanced to look up would have seen something utterly inexplicable, perhaps interpreting it as a sign from gods they hadn't even invented yet. A pterodactyl probably just squawked in confusion and flew into a tree. Their primary landing zone has been selected with care: the Fertile Crescent, the land between the rivers Mesopotamia. Specifically, they aim for the coastal regions of what will one day be the Persian Gulf. The telemetry from their long-range scans promised access to fresh water from the mighty Tigris and Euphrates rivers, a relatively stable climate by early Earth standards, meaning only occasional supervolcanoes or global floods, and most importantly, proximity to the rich gold deposits they believe lie buried deep beneath the African continent, accessible via this strategic base of operations. Remember, these aren't tourists looking for a nice beach. They're setting up a long-term industrial operation. They need infrastructure, or at least a place to build IT today. As the first ship touches down, there is no jarring impact. Its landing struts, more like articulated energy projectors than simple metal legs, absorb the final contact with the Earth's surface, settling the immense craft with the delicacy of a butterfly alighting on a flower, a very large, very metallic, very alien butterfly. The silence that follows is profound, broken only by the unfamiliar sounds of a primitive Earth, the distant roar of a strange beast, the chirping of insects that have never encountered anything like this, the sigh of the wind through giant ferns. For a long moment, nothing happens. Then, with a barely audible hiss, a ramp extends from the ship's belly, touching the virgin soil. Out steps the first Anunnaki onto Earth. Enki, perhaps, one of Anu's sons, a brilliant scientist and engineer, often depicted in later myths as a god of wisdom and water. He's tall, even by Nibiruan standards, his features sharp and intelligent, his eyes scanning the surroundings with a mixture of analytical curiosity and maybe a touch of weariness from the long voyage. He takes a breath. The air here is thick, humid, soupy with oxygen levels that would be overwhelming for a modern human, let alone a Nibiruan adapted to a thinning atmosphere. It's rich with the smell of damp earth, decaying vegetation, and 1,000 unknown life forms. It's the smell of a planet teeming with raw, untamed vitality. He might have needed a moment to adjust, maybe even popped an intergalactic antihistamine. More Anunnaki emerge, their forms casting long shadows in the alien sunlight. They move with purpose, deploying sensor arrays, atmospheric analyzers, and defensive perimeters. Their suits, though sleek, are clearly designed for protection against unknown biological and environmental hazards. Earth, for all its life-giving properties, is a wild card. Unknown bacteria, viruses, oversized insects. Who knows what delightful surprises a new planet might offer? It's a bit like going on a camping trip without checking the weather forecast or packing any bug spray, only on an infinitely grander scale. They're probably thinking, right, let's not get eaten by that weird-looking six-legged rhino thing on day one. Their first impressions of Earth are sensory overload. The colors are more vibrant, the sounds more cacophonous, the sheer biological density almost overwhelming compared to their dying, sparser Nibiru. Giant trees, unlike anything on their homeworld, tower into the sky. Strange, reptilian creatures lumber through the undergrowth. The gravity, too, is different, heavier than Nibiru's, and it takes time for them to adjust their movements, to feel comfortable in their own bodies on this new world. The sheer, unadulterated wildness of Earth is both awe-inspiring and vaguely threatening. Historians still argue whether the rapid development of large fauna during certain prehistoric periods was purely evolutionary, or if the planet was subject to external influences or unusual environmental conditions. For the Anunnaki, these large fauna are simply another data set, another potential obstacle, or perhaps a resource. The early days are a whirlwind of activity. The first base, Eridu, home in the faraway, is established. It's not a city of gleaming towers, not yet. It's a functional, fortified encampment, built with materials brought from Nibiru and, increasingly, with resources processed on Earth. They deploy advanced robotic drones for surveying and construction, their movements swift and precise. These drones begin the arduous task of carving out a habitable zone, leveling ground, and erecting the initial structures that will serve as laboratories, living quarters, and command centers. The level of technology is such that what would take humans centuries to achieve, they accomplish in weeks or months. The ziggurat of Ur, a massive step pyramid built much later by humans in Mesopotamia, is a good example of ancient monumental architecture. Its construction around 2100 BCE involved millions of baked bricks and immense labor. The Anunnaki are working on an entirely different technological level, making such feats look like child's play. They quickly discover that Earth is indeed rich in gold, but accessing it is going to be a monumental challenge. The initial surveys from space were accurate, but the reality on the ground is always more complex. The gold isn't just lying around in convenient Nibiru-sized nuggets. It's locked deep within the Earth, often in challenging geological formations, requiring sophisticated mining techniques and a tremendous amount of labor. This isn't going to be a quick smash-and-grab operation. This is going to be a long, hard slog. Enki, or whoever is leading this initial landing party, reports back to Nibiru. Imagine the transmission crackling across the solar system, carrying the good news and the bad. Yes, the gold is here. Yes, Earth is survivable, even bountiful in its own way. But the extraction process will be far more difficult and resource-intensive than initially hoped. They will need more personnel, more equipment, more time. The news is received on Nibiru with a mixture of relief and trepidation. They have found their lifeline, but it's a lifeline they will have to fight to hold on to. The Anunnaki on Earth, pioneers on a strange and often hostile world, look up at the alien sky, at the distant pinprick of light that is their home, and know that their mission has only just begun. The air might be thick and the gravity a bit of a drag, but the prize is worth it. Or so they hope. The fate of an entire civilization is now tied to this vibrant, chaotic, and stubbornly uncooperative blue planet, with Eridu established as their beachhead, a small, gleaming testament to Nibiruan ingenuity amidst the primordial chaos of ancient Earth. The real work, the messy, backbreaking, gold-dredging work, begins. You are there, not as a participant, thank goodness your soft hands wouldn't last a day, but as an observer, feeling the grit in the air and the weary determination of these celestial visitors. Their initial target, the lands of the Abzu, what you'd later know as southeastern Africa. This region, according to their detailed geological surveys conducted from orbit and refined by on-the-ground prospecting teams, holds the richest veins of gold, the motherlode they crossed galaxies to find. Getting there and setting up operations, however, is another story entirely. It's not like they can just call an Uber saucer. The Anunnaki deploy smaller, more agile craft for transport and exploration, skimming over dense jungles, vast savannas teeming with unfamiliar megafauna, and across formidable mountain ranges. Imagine them, these highly advanced beings, peering out of their viewports at herds of creatures that would make a Jurassic Park T-Rex look like a house pet. They're probably muttering, note to self, install bigger bug zappers on the perimeter. Their technology allows them to map terrain, analyze soil composition, and pinpoint gold deposits with astonishing accuracy, but can't change the fundamental reality. This Earth is a wild, untamed beast. The heat in Africa is oppressive, humidity relentless. Strange insects buzz with annoying persistence, and the local wildlife, while not overtly hostile in most cases, is certainly not welcoming. They are aliens here, in every sense of the word. Their first attempts at gold extraction are met with frustration. They possess tools that can pulverize rock and sift elements with incredible efficiency, but the sheer scale of the operation is daunting. They need to move mountains, literally, to get at the quantities of gold required to save Nibiru. Their initial teams are composed of high-ranking Anunnaki, scientists, engineers, commanders. These are beings of immense intellect, accustomed to commanding starships and designing planetary atmospheric shields, not toiling in muddy pits under an alien sun. You can almost picture a very distinguished Anunnaki noble, covered head to toe in grime, looking at a stubborn rock face and thinking, there has got to be a better way to do this. My manicurist on Nibiru would have a fit. The mining process itself is a marvel, even in its early, struggling stages. They employ sonic resonators to fracture bedrock, laser drills to bore deep into the earth, and sophisticated chemical processes to leach gold from ore. But the environment fights back. Flash floods can wipe out a day's work in minutes. Equipment designed for the more stable conditions of Nibiru or the vacuum of space sometimes malfunctions in the high humidity or due to unforeseen geological conditions. And the gold, oh the gold. It's there, all right, but it's often fine particulate gold, mixed with tons of worthless rock, requiring enormous effort to extract and refine. This isn't the easy pickings they might have fantasized about during those long, dark years in transit. The ancient gold mines of southern Africa, such as those around modern-day Mpumalanga, show evidence of human mining activity dating back at least 40,000 years, a mainstream archaeological fact. The Anunnaki, if this narrative holds, were there far earlier, their activities perhaps laying the geological groundwork or leaving subtle traces that conventional science hasn't yet recognized or attributed to them. The psychological toll on these first Anunnaki miners must also be considered. They are far from home, engaged in grueling physical labor for which they are ill-suited, and the salvation of their world rests squarely on their increasingly weary shoulders. Their leaders, like Enki and perhaps his half-brother Enlil, who, according to the tales, arrives later and takes on a more commanding and often harsher role, try to maintain morale, but the endless toil and the slow progress are disheartening. They send regular reports back to Nibiru, detailing the challenges and requesting more resources, more personnel. Each communication is a tight beam transmission, a whisper across the vastness of space, carrying the weight of their struggles. One quirky, though perhaps not entirely fringe, tidbit is the sheer number of ancient gold mines found throughout southern Africa, many of which predate known indigenous cultures capable of such extensive operations. Some researchers, outside the mainstream, point to these as potential evidence of a far older, technologically advanced mining presence. Could these be the remnants of Anunnaki efforts? Or are they simply a testament to the long-forgotten history of early human ingenuity? Historians still argue whether the sheer scale of some ancient mine workings can be explained by conventional historical models of population and technology. The Anunnaki are not just digging, they are also building. They establish new outposts closer to the mining operations. Tibera, Bright City, where ores are made final, for example, becomes a metallurgical center. They construct rudimentary refineries, power stations drawing on geothermal or perhaps even more exotic energy sources, and fortified settlements to protect themselves from the environment and potentially from any unforeseen local threats. Though intelligent, organized local resistance isn't a factor at this very early stage. Their focus is entirely on the gold. Every decision, every allocation of resources, is driven by this singular, desperate need. They aren't colonizing Earth for pleasure or for conquest in the traditional sense. They are here as reluctant, celestial miners, driven by the ticking clock of their homeworld's demise. You can imagine the scenes at the end of a long Nibiruan work cycle. The weary Anunnaki, their gleaming armor now caked with mud and rock dust, returning to their austere living quarters. The taste of recycled air, the longing for the familiar dying skies of Nibiru. They are gods, yes, beings of immense power and longevity, but they are also individuals, subject to fatigue, frustration, and perhaps even despair. The early romance of the mission, if there ever was one, has long since faded, replaced by the grim reality of hard labor. They are like cosmic gold prospectors who have hit a promising vein, only to find it runs deeper and is more stubbornly embedded than they ever imagined. The initial gold fever, the excitement of discovery, is now tempered by the dawning realization that this will be a far longer and more arduous undertaking than anyone on Nibiru had anticipated. And the demand from their home world is relentless. More gold, faster. The atmospheric shield continues to degrade, and every delay on Earth brings Nibiru closer to catastrophe. The pressure is immense. The reports reaching Nibiru paint a clear, if discouraging, picture. The gold is there, but the high-ranking Anunnaki, for all their brilliance in science, engineering, and starship command, are simply not cut out for the relentless, soul-crushing toil of deep Earth mining in an alien environment. They are managers, thinkers, leaders, not manual laborers. Imagine trying to get your highly paid CEO to spend 12 hours a day swinging a pickaxe in a humid, mosquito-infested pit, productivity might suffer, and the quarterly reports would probably feature a lot more swearing. The yield of gold, while steady, is far too slow to meet the urgent needs of their dying homeworld. Anu and his council on Nibiru, faced with this grim reality, make a difficult decision. They must send reinforcements. But not just any reinforcements. They need workers. And so a new wave of Nibiruans makes the long journey to Earth. These are not the elite of Anunnaki society. They are a lesser class, different rank, the Igigi. Think of them as the NCOs and enlisted men to the Anunnaki officers, the skilled technicians, the overseers, the ones who actually knew how to get their hands dirty without requiring a committee meeting first. They are still highly intelligent and capable by any human standard, far more so than any life form currently evolving on Earth, but their status within Nibiruan hierarchy is subordinate to the Anunnaki proper, the sons of Anu, the council members, the mission leaders. They are, in essence, the celestial working class, sent to take over the grueling physical labor that the initial expeditionary force found so debilitating and inefficient. Their arrival brings a new dynamic to the fledgling Earth operations. The Anunnaki leaders, like Enki and Enlil, now transition more fully into managerial and command roles, overseeing the vast and expanding mining enterprise. The Igigi are deployed to the mines in the Abzu, Africa, and also to new sites being established in Mesopotamia itself, where processing and logistical operations are centered. You see them now, these Igigi, their forms perhaps slightly less imposing than the leading Anunnaki, but still powerful, descending into the dark shafts, operating the heavy machinery, enduring the dust, the heat, and the mind-numbing repetition of the work. Their task is singular, to extract gold, and to do it on an industrial scale. The workload is immense. The Igigi toil in shifts, around the clock, under the watchful eyes of their Anunnaki supervisors. They dig deeper, expand existing mines, and prospect for new veins. The amount of or they process is staggering. Rock is blasted, crushed, transported, and sifted, all for those precious flecks of gold that mean survival for a distant world. The landscape around a mining operations begins to change, scarred by pits, tailings, and the infrastructure of this massive undertaking. Imagine vast open-cast mines, not so different in principle from those you see today, but excavated with technologies that are still beyond your reach. The sheer volume of earth moved would be colossal. Mainstream science acknowledges that Earth's early crust was richer in certain heavy metals, including gold, due to processes like meteor bombardment and volcanic activity during the Hadean and Archean eons. The Anunnaki, with their advanced prospecting, are simply exploiting these ancient concentrations. Life for the Igigi is harsh. While their living conditions are undoubtedly superior to anything an early human could imagine, they are still basic by Nibiruan standards. They are living in functional barracks, eating processed rations, and their entire existence is focused on the mines. They are thousands of light years from home, from their families, from any semblance of a normal Nibiruan life. Their only respite is the brief period between shifts, and the only horizon they see is the next mountain of or to be processed. There's a certain grim camaraderie among them, the bond of shared hardship, but also a growing weariness. They signed up for this, yes, or were perhaps conscripted, with a promise of glory, of saving their world. But the reality is far from glorious. It's dirty, dangerous, and seemingly endless. You can almost hear their weary sighs echoing in the subterranean tunnels, the clank of their tools a monotonous soundtrack to their exile. One interesting, slightly fringe theory that sometimes surfaces in discussions about ancient astronauts is the idea that some mythological accounts of lesser gods or angelic beings serving greater gods might be distorted memories of these different ranks within the Anunnaki hierarchy, the powerful ruling Anunnaki and the subordinate, laboring Igigi. It's a neat way to map the narrative onto existing mythological structures. The Igigi, in some interpretations of the Sumerian texts, which are, of course, our primary source for much of this Anunnaki narrative, were said to have toiled for centuries. Historians still argue whether the concept of divine labor in many ancient pantheons reflects social hierarchies projected onto the gods, or if it could hint at something more. The pressure from Nibiru remains relentless. The atmospheric shield is still thinning. The council demands more gold, faster. Quotas are set, and the Anunnaki commanders on Earth push the Igigi to meet them. Enlil, often portrayed as the sterner, more disciplined leader compared to the scientific and perhaps more empathetic Enki, takes charge of the mining operations with an iron fist. Efficiency is paramount. Excuses are not tolerated. The goal is everything. He's the kind of boss who thinks team-building exercises involve digging a deeper pit faster. For a long time, the Igigi bear their burden. They are loyal to Nibiru, dedicated to the mission. They understand the stakes. But even Nibiruan endurance has its limits. The centuries, by Earth reckoning, though perhaps shorter periods in their own perception due to longevity or time dilation effects of their work cycles, of unceasing toil begin to take their toll. The initial dedication starts to fray, replaced by a simmering resentment. They see the Anunnaki leaders in their relatively comfortable compounds, making plans, issuing orders, while they, the Igigi, are literally breaking their backs in the bowels of the earth. The disparity begins to rankle. They are not mindless drones. They are intelligent beings, and they are beginning to question the fairness of their situation. The gold flows. Yes, shipments are regularly dispatched back to Nibiru using the refined metal to create the precious dust for their atmosphere. But for the workers on the ground, life is an endless cycle of labor and exhaustion. The seeds of discontent are being sown in the dust of the African gold mines, watered by sweat and weariness. A storm is brewing, a storm that will threaten to derail the entire Nibiruan enterprise on Earth. The simmering resentment among the Igigi doesn't boil over in a day. It's a slow burn, fueled by centuries of relentless labor, by the gnawing ache of homesickness, and by the ever-present dust of the gold mines that seems to coat their very souls. You are there, not in the choking tunnels, but in the tense atmosphere of their communal halls after a brutal shift, or in the hushed, angry whispers exchanged in the darkness of their barracks. The initial pride of serving Nibiru, of being part of the Great Rescue Mission, has long since eroded, leaving behind a gritty residue of bitterness. They look at their calloused hands, their weary bodies, and then they look at the Anunnaki commanders, and Enlil, in particular, with his exacting standards and seemingly inexhaustible demands, and the chasm between their experiences feels wider than the space between Earth and Nibiru. The tipping point comes during a particularly grueling period. Perhaps a new, deeper vein of gold has been discovered, requiring even more dangerous and exhausting extraction methods. Or maybe the quotas from Nibiru have been increased yet again, pushing the Igigi beyond their already strained limits. Whatever the spark, the tinder of their discontent is dry and plentiful. They begin to talk more openly now, not just grumbling about the conditions but questioning the entire system. Why us, they ask. Why must we bear this burden alone while the great Anunnaki issue decrees from their comfortable abodes in Eridu or Bad Tibra? They recall the promises made on Nibiru, the shared sacrifice that was supposed to save their world. This feels less like a shared sacrifice and more like celestial servitude. Even celestial beings can get fed up with being treated like cosmic ditch diggers. The ancient Sumerian Atrahasis epic, one of the primary textual sources for this narrative, and a well-established historical artifact studied by mainstream Assyriologists, vividly describes this very scenario. It tells of how the gods, the Igigi, had to dig the rivers and canals, toiling under the whip of their Anunnaki masters. For 40 years, the texts say, though the duration is symbolic and likely means a very long time, they endure the hardship. The parallels are striking. Historians still argue whether these ancient Mesopotamian myths are purely allegorical representations of human societal struggles, or if they preserve a distorted folk memory of actual, extraordinary events. One Igigi, perhaps a natural leader, or maybe just the one who finally snaps, begins to rally the others. He speaks of their suffering, of the injustice, of the broken promises. He reminds them of their own worth, their own skills, their own Nibiruan heritage. They are not slaves, he argues, but sons of Nibiru, just like the Anunnaki they serve. The words find fertile ground. The weariness turns to anger, the the resignation to a fragile, rebellious hope. They organize secretly at first, their clandestine meetings held in the deepest, most remote sections of the mines, or under the cover of Earth's unfamiliar night. They're probably using coded language like, "Is the space donkey tired?" Meaning, "Are you also sick of Enlil's micromanagement?" The plan is simple, audacious, and utterly desperate: a general strike. They will lay down their tools. They will refuse to work. They will bring the entire gold mining operation to a grinding halt. It's a massive gamble. They know the Anunnaki, particularly Enlil, will not take this lightly. Punishment could be severe, but they have reached a point where the fear of retribution is outweighed by the misery of their current existence. They are pushed to the brink, and they are about to push back. The day of the rebellion arrives. As the shift change occurs, instead of heading into the mines, the Igigi gather. They stand, silent and defiant, their tools discarded at their feet. Word quickly reaches Enlil. He arrives, his presence radiating authority and displeasure. He demands an explanation. He reminds them of their duty, of Nibiru's plight. He threatens. But the Igigi, emboldened by their numbers and their shared desperation, hold firm. They refuse to return to the mines. Their spokesman steps forward and voices their grievances: the endless toil, the harsh conditions, the inequity of their burden. "We will dig no more," is their defiant cry, echoing a sentiment that probably resonates with anyone who's ever had a really, really bad day at work. Enlil is furious. This is insubordination of the highest order, a direct threat to the mission and, by extension, to Nibiru itself. His first instinct is likely to crush the rebellion with overwhelming force. But even he, in his anger, recognizes the dilemma. The Igigi are the workforce. If he punishes them too harshly or eliminates them, who will mine the gold? The high-ranking Anunnaki certainly aren't going back to that drudgery. He is caught in a bind. The entire operation, the lifeline of his homeworld, is paralyzed. The silence from the mines is deafening, more alarming than any explosion or equipment failure. News of the mutiny spreads to the other Anunnaki leaders, including Enki. Enki, ever the pragmatist and perhaps more sympathetic to the plight of the workers, or at least more aware of the practical consequences of their continued refusal to work, advocates for a different approach. A council is convened. The situation is dire. The flow of gold to Nibiru has stopped. The atmospheric shield continues to degrade. Time is running out, and now their own workforce has gone on strike. It's a celestial HR nightmare. One quirky detail sometimes mentioned in fringe interpretations of these events is the idea that the Igigi actually burned their tools in a symbolic act of defiance, a cosmic take this job and shove it gesture. While the texts speak of them setting fire to their implements, it underscores the depth of their frustration. The Anunnaki Council is in uproar. Accusations fly. Blame is assigned. But amidst the chaos, Enki proposes a radical, almost unthinkable solution. If the Igigi will not work, and the Anunnaki cannot or will not do the work themselves, then they need a new source of labor. A source that can be controlled, that can endure the hardship, that can be created. The rebellion of the Igigi, born of desperation and toil, has inadvertently set the stage for an even more profound and controversial act: the fashioning of a new being, a primitive worker, to take over the burden of the mines. The solution to one crisis will sow the seeds of an entirely new chapter in Earth's history and in the Anunnaki's complex relationship with a planet they came to exploit. The echoes of the Igigi's defiance will resonate for millennia, not just in the myths of gods and rebellious angels, but in the very DNA of the creature that is about to be conceived. The Anunnaki Council chamber buzzes with an energy that is part desperation, part outrage, and part sheer, unadulterated panic. The Igigi rebellion has thrown a colossal wrench, or perhaps a Nibiruan hyperspanner, into the cosmic works. Gold production has ceased. Nibiru's atmospheric shield is, metaphorically speaking, running on fumes. Enlil, still fuming from the insubordination, likely argues for a harsh crackdown, a swift and brutal example to be made of the ringleaders. We should just blast them with something suitably intimidating and then get back to work, he might be thinking, his brow furrowed like a plowed field. But Enki, the master scientist, the pragmatist, the one who always seems to have a plan B, and possibly C, D, and E involving duct tape and a bit of quantum mechanics, steps forward with his audacious proposal. We need workers, he states, his voice calm amidst the turmoil. The Igigi refuse. We ourselves are ill-suited for this prolonged base labor. Therefore, we must make workers. You can imagine the stunned silence that follows. Make workers? How? From what? The very idea is revolutionary, perhaps even blasphemous to some of the more conservative Anunnaki sensibilities. They are here to mine gold, not to play creator. But Enki is persuasive. He outlines his plan, a feat of genetic engineering so advanced it would make your leading 21st century scientists look like they're struggling with Play-Doh. He proposes to take an existing creature on Earth, one that has shown promise, a primitive hominid already walking upright, already possessing a certain rudimentary intelligence, and to upgrade it, to modify its genetic code, to imprint upon it the essence of the Anunnaki, just enough to make it capable of understanding instructions, performing complex tasks, and crucially, toiling in the mines. The ethical debate, if there is one, is likely brief and heavily weighted by the existential threat to Nibiru. Desperate times, as they say, call for desperate genetic manipulation. The primary concern isn't the moral implications of creating a sentient or semi-sentient workforce, but rather the practicalities. Can it be done? Will it be effective? Will these new creatures be controllable? Enlil, despite his initial fury at the Igigi, is eventually swayed by the logic. If this is the only way to get the gold flowing again, then so be it. The survival of Nibiru trumps all other considerations. The ancient Sumerian text, such as the Enuma Elish, though more focused on cosmic creation, and the Atrahasis, do indeed describe the gods deciding to create humanity to bear their labor. The Atrahasis is particularly explicit. Let man bear the load of the gods. This isn't just a fringe interpretation. It's a core element of the mythological narrative passed down by the Sumerians themselves. So, the project is greenlit. Enki, assisted by Ninhursag, also known as Ninti or Mami, the chief medical officer and a specialist in genetics, or kind of Nibiru and Dr. Frankenstein, but hopefully with better bedside manner, sets up a laboratory. This isn't some gloomy castle chamber filled with bubbling beakers and Jacob's ladders. It's a sterile high-tech facility, probably within their main settlement of Eridu, or perhaps a specially constructed research outpost. They need genetic material. Anunnaki DNA, of course, to provide the spark of higher intelligence and capability. And they need the clay, the raw biological material, to be molded. They capture several of the local hominids, likely Australopithecines or early Homo habilis, creatures that are already bipedal, with grasping hands and a brain capable of further development. Imagine these primitive beings, plucked from their familiar forests and savannas, finding themselves in a brightly lit, sterile environment, facing tall, luminous beings who examine them with intense, unreadable curiosity. They're probably thinking, this is not the berry patch I was looking for. The process is complex, a delicate dance of genetic splicing and manipulation. Enki and Ninhursag extract egg cells from the female hominids. They then fertilize these eggs with the sperm of a carefully selected young Anunnaki male. Some texts even suggest Enki himself provides the essence, though this is a point of much debate and dramatic interpretation. The key is to blend the two genetic codes, to weave together the robustness and earth adaptability of the hominid with the intelligence and trainability derived from the Anunnaki. They are not trying to create new Anunnaki. They are trying to create a hybrid, a Lulu Amalu, a primitive worker. The goal is a being intelligent enough to follow orders and use tools, but not so intelligent as to rebel like the Igigi, or to question its own existence, at least, not initially. Historians still argue whether the sudden cognitive leap evidenced in the human fossil record, the so-called Great Leap Forward, was purely a result of natural evolutionary processes, or if other, as yet unidentified factors might have played a role. There are many failures. The early attempts at fertilization and gestation might result in non-viable embryos, or creatures that are malformed, or simply not what they intended. The texts speak of Ninhursag's struggles, of her trials and errors. Each failure is a setback, a frustration, but Enki and Ninhursag are persistent. They refine their techniques, adjust the genetic mixtures. One quirky and admittedly rather speculative element sometimes discussed in fringe circles is the idea that various mythological creatures, centaurs, satyrs, merfolk, might be garbled memories of these early, unsuccessful genetic experiments, the mistakes that were perhaps allowed to wander off into the wilderness. It's a wild thought, but in a story this grand, why not? Finally, success. A viable embryo is created. But how to bring it to term? The hominid females are not suitable surrogates for this new, hybrid being. So, Anunnaki females are called upon to act as birth mothers. Several birth goddesses, as the texts call them, volunteer or are perhaps assigned this crucial, unprecedented role. They carry the genetically engineered embryos to term. This is a significant sacrifice, a profound involvement of the Anunnaki females in the creation of this new workforce. Imagine their experience, nurturing a being that is part them, part alien, a creature designed for servitude. The first successful birth is a momentous occasion. A new being, unlike anything seen on Earth before, is brought into the world. It is more robust than a purebred Anunnaki, better adapted to Earth's environment, yet it possesses a spark of intelligence, a capacity for learning that far surpasses its hominid ancestors. It is the prototype, the first of its kind. They call it Ayamu, meaning of the earth, or earthling, a direct parallel to the biblical Adam. This isn't just about creating one worker. It's about creating a template, a species that can reproduce and provide a sustainable workforce for the gold mines. The Igigi rebellion has forced the Anunnaki's hand, pushing them down a path of creation that will have consequences far beyond their immediate need for gold. They sought to solve a labor dispute. They are about to alter the destiny of a planet. The birth of Adamu, the first successful Lulu Amalu, the primitive worker, is met with a mixture of triumph and trepidation in the Anunnaki laboratories. Enki and Ninhursag examine their creation with the keen eyes of scientists who have just achieved a monumental breakthrough. He is sturdier than an Anunnaki, his skin perhaps darker, more adapted to the harsh sun of the Abzu. His eyes, though, hold a new light, a flicker of understanding that sets him apart from the native hominids from which his lineage partly springs. He is the culmination of countless experiments, the answer to the Igigi's mutiny, and the potential savior of the gold mining operation. But he is also an unknown quantity. How will he develop? Will he be docile? Will he be capable of the tasks required? It's like they've just invented a new type of smartphone. It looks great, has all the features, but will the battery last, and will it try to take over your life? The initial task is to create more. Adamu is the prototype, but an army of workers is needed. Using the genetic template refined from Adamu's creation, Enki and Ninhursag streamline the process. More Anunnaki birth goddesses are involved, and soon a small but growing population of these new beings exists within the controlled environment of the Anunnaki settlements, likely in a dedicated area in Eden, the Sumerian name for the plain or steppe, often associated with the Fertile Crescent, not to be confused with the later biblical Eden, though the connection is tantalizing. These first humans are not born into families in the way you understand it. They are products of a biological assembly line, nurtured and observed by their creators. Their early life is one of learning and conditioning. They are taught basic commands, how to use simple tools, how to perform repetitive tasks. The Anunnaki are their teachers, their overseers, their gods. You see them, these early Lulu, their physique a blend of hominid resilience and a subtle Anunnaki refinement. They are stronger than their purely hominid ancestors, more intelligent, capable of understanding complex instructions, at least complex for the time. They are not, however, imbued with the full spectrum of Anunnaki consciousness or longevity. They are designed for a purpose, to work. Their lifespan is intentionally limited, their intellectual capabilities capped. The Anunnaki have learned their lesson from the Igigi rebellion. They do not want another workforce capable of sophisticated philosophical debate about workers' rights or demanding better dental plans. These Lulu are meant to be compliant, efficient, and crucially replaceable. Once a sufficient number of these primitive workers has been manufactured and brought to a basic level of competence, they are deployed to the mines. Imagine the scene, the Igigi still sullen and resentful, but perhaps also a little curious. Watch as these new beings are marched into the depths of the earth, into the very tunnels where they themselves had toiled and rebelled. The Lulu take up the discarded tools. They begin to dig, to haul, to process the earth, all under the direction of Igigi foremen, who are probably relieved not to be doing the actual digging anymore, and Anunnaki supervisors. The gold operation, after a potentially disastrous interruption, slowly grinds back into motion. The flow of precious metal to Nibiru can resume. The Lulu prove to be remarkably effective. They are physically robust, capable of enduring the harsh conditions of the mines better than the Anunnaki or even the Igigi. Their simpler minds are less prone to existential angst or philosophical objections to hard labor. They work, they eat, they sleep, and they obey. From the Anunnaki perspective, they are the perfect solution. The ancient Egyptian civilization, much later in history, relied heavily on organized labor for its massive construction projects, like the pyramids. While not slavery in the chattel sense for much of its history, the state corvée system conscripted large numbers of citizens for manual labor. The Anunnaki system with the Lulu, however, is more fundamental. They created their workforce specifically for this purpose. However, there's a snag. The initial Lulu being all male, or perhaps the females were sterile, or their reproductive capabilities not yet activated, the texts are ambiguous on the very first generation, cannot reproduce on their own. This means Enki and Ninhursag must continue the laborious process of creating each worker individually in their labs. This is time-consuming and inefficient if they are to build a truly sustainable workforce. The solution? Another genetic tweak. Enki, perhaps with a mischievous glint in his eye that will cause no end of trouble later, decides to modify the Lulu further, to give them the ability to procreate. This is a significant step. It means the Lulu will become a self-replicating workforce. It also means they will begin to evolve and develop independently of direct Anunnaki manipulation, albeit slowly. Historians still argue whether the emergence of Homo sapiens was a gradual evolutionary process or if it involved periods of accelerated development, possibly influenced by unique environmental or genetic factors. With the ability to reproduce, the Lulu population begins to grow. They are still confined, still controlled, but they are forming their own primitive society, their own simple culture, within the bounds set by their creators. They are not yet human in the full sense that you understand it. They lack the self-awareness, the creativity, the divine spark, or so the Anunnaki believe, that characterizes their makers. They are biological machines designed for labor. One quirky tidbit from some interpretations of Sumerian lore is the idea that these early humans were initially unable to speak or clothe themselves, and that these skills were later given or taught to them by the Anunnaki, a slow process of guided development. This contrasts with the idea of them being instantly proficient. The Anunnaki, for the most part, view the Lulu with a detached, utilitarian regard. They are tools, instruments to achieve a vital goal. There is little affection, little empathy. These are not their children. They are their creations, their property. The Lulu, in turn, look upon the Anunnaki as powerful, enigmatic beings, the source of their existence, the givers of commands. They don't worship them, not yet, not in the religious sense. Their relationship is one of master and servant, creator and creature. The concept of gods as beings to be adored and placated will come later, as human consciousness evolves and tries to make sense of these towering, powerful figures who dictate their lives. For now, the Lulu toil in the mines, in the fields, as agriculture is slowly introduced around the Anunnaki settlements to feed the growing population, their lives circumscribed by the needs of distant Nibiru. They're the makers of man's first, rough draft, a biological solution to an engineering problem, unaware of the cosmic drama that led to their genesis or the immense destiny that awaits their distant descendants, with the Lulu Amalu, the primitive workers, now capable of reproduction and diligently, if perhaps unenthusiastically, toiling in the gold mines and performing other essential labors. The Anunnaki settlements on Earth begin to transform. Eridu, their first city, expands. New centers are established, Bad Tibra for metallurgy, Larik and Sapar as administrative or command posts, and Shurapak, which will later become famous in flood legends, as perhaps a center for grain storage and distribution. These are not just crude mining camps anymore. They are becoming genuine outposts of Nibiruan civilization, albeit on a hostile alien world. You see them, these gleaming, functional cities, rising from the plains of Mesopotamia. Their architecture is stark contrast to the primitive reed huts or caves that might shelter the indigenous hominids still roaming beyond the Anunnaki sphere of influence. These cities are organized, efficient, and powered by technologies that are still millennia away for the nascent human race. The Lulu, initially confined to barracks or designated worker zones, begin to form their own rudimentary communities around the periphery of these Anunnaki centers. As their numbers grow, and as generations pass, they are no longer just the direct creations of Enki and Ninhursag's labs. They are born, they grow up, they learn from their parents and from the Anunnaki overseers. Their lives are still largely defined by labor, in the mines of the Abzu, or increasingly, in cultivating the land around the Mesopotamian cities to provide food for the expanding population. Remember that whole bread and circuses thing? Well, the Anunnaki are providing the bread, or at least the means to grow it, and the work itself is probably circus enough for the Lulu. It's during this period that the Anunnaki begin to impart certain knowledge to their human charges, not out of altruism, but out of necessity. A completely ignorant workforce is an inefficient workforce. So the Lulu are taught basic agriculture, how to till the soil, plant seeds, and harvest crops. They are shown how to domesticate certain local animals, providing a stable source of food and labor. They learn rudimentary construction techniques, enough to build their own simple dwellings and maintain basic infrastructure. These are the gifts of the gods, as later myths would remember them, the foundational skills of civilization passed down from the Shining Ones. Imagine an Anunnaki agricultural expert, sighing with exasperation, trying to explain crop rotation to a group of Lulu who are still more interested in chasing squirrels. No, the barley goes in the ground, not up your nose. The Sumerians, who are considered by mainstream history to be the creators of one of the world's first true civilizations in Mesopotamia from around 4500 BCE, attributed many of their achievements, writing, mathematics, astronomy, irrigation, law codes, kingship, to divine instruction from their gods, whom they called the Anunna, a clear linguistic link to Anunnaki. They documented these beliefs on thousands of cuneiform clay tablets. This isn't fringe. It's a cornerstone of Mesopotamian studies. The narrative we're exploring tonight simply posits that these gods were flesh and blood extraterrestrial visitors. You witness the slow dawn of what you would recognize as civilization. Small villages of Lulu spring up around the Anunnaki cities. They learn to manage irrigation canals, drawing water from the Tigris and Euphrates to make the arid land bloom, a skill directly taught by Anunnaki engineers who understood hydraulics on a planetary scale. They develop a simple social structure based on family units and workgroups. Their language, initially just basic commands and grunts, becomes more complex as they need to communicate more sophisticated ideas related to their tasks and their growing community. Historians still argue whether the development of complex language in early humans was a gradual process, or if it occurred in punctuated bursts, possibly linked to genetic or social triggers. The Anunnaki, for their part, largely keep their distance. They are the masters, the overseers. They live in their own restricted zones, their shining cities, interacting with the Lulu primarily to issue instructions and ensure the quotas for gold and other resources are met. There is a clear hierarchy, an unbridgeable gap between the creators and the created. However, as time passes, some level of interaction beyond simple commands is inevitable. Younger Anunnaki, perhaps born on Earth or simply bored with the endless routine, might take a closer, more curious interest in these developing humans. One quirky tidbit that emerges from this period is the concept of the Apkallu. In Mesopotamian myth, 7 semi-divine sages, who were said to have brought wisdom and civilization to mankind before the Great Flood. These figures, often depicted as fishmen or wearing fish-like cloaks, possibly a misremembered uniform or environmental suit if you squint, were servants of Enki. Could these be a folk memory of specific Anunnaki individuals tasked with the education and uplifting of the early human communities? It's a fascinating idea that links the mythological with the functional needs of the Anunnaki mission. The cities like Eridu, Nippur, which became Enlil's sacred city, and Lagash begin to flourish not just as mining support centers, but as hubs of this burgeoning, albeit controlled, human civilization. The Anunnaki established temples, which are less places of worship in the modern sense, and more like administrative centers, observatories, and residences for the leading gods. These structures are built with a level of precision and astronomical alignment that baffles later human builders for millennia. The Lulu provide the labor, quarrying the stone, hauling the materials, but the design, the engineering, the sheer architectural vision comes from the Nibiruan masters. This period represents a delicate balance. The Anunnaki have their workforce. The gold is flowing. Nibiru is, presumably, getting its atmospheric fix. The Lulu are slowly, painstakingly developing the rudiments of civilization under the tutelage of their creators. But it's a controlled evolution, a guided development. The humans are not yet masters of their own destiny. They are still, fundamentally, tools. But tools have a funny way of developing minds of their own, especially when they start to multiply and learn. The seeds of a more complex and ultimately more problematic relationship are being sown in the fertile soil of Mesopotamia, watered by the twin rivers and the sweat of the first human laborers. The garden is growing, but the gardeners might soon find that some of their plants have unexpected ambitions, as generations of Lulu Amalu live and toil under the shadow of the Anunnaki cities. The relationship between the creators and the created inevitably begins to shift from simple master-servant dynamics to something far more complex and, frankly, a bit messy. You are there, not just in the dusty mines or the newly cultivated fields, but in the subtle, often unspoken interactions that weave a new kind of tapestry between these two vastly different groups. The Anunnaki are still the bosses, the shining ones, the beings who descended from the heavens with unimaginable power and knowledge. But the humans, these rapidly evolving Lulu, are no longer just unthinking automatons. They are developing their own thoughts, their own emotions, their own nascent culture, and they are starting to look at their gods with a mixture of awe, fear, and a dawning, dangerous curiosity. The Anunnaki themselves are not a monolithic entity. There are different factions, different personalities, different agendas. Enki, the scientist, the engineer, perhaps takes a more detached, almost paternalistic interest in his creations. He sees their potential, their adaptability. He might even feel a certain pride in how far they've come from those primitive hominids. Enlil, on the other hand, the stern commander, the one primarily concerned with order and productivity, likely views the growing human population with increasing suspicion. He sees them as a resource to be managed, a potential problem to be controlled. He's the cosmic equivalent of a landlord who's very particular about tenants not leaving muddy footprints in the hallway, especially if those footprints are leading to demands for, say, basic human rights. Then there are the younger Anunnaki, perhaps those born on Earth or who have spent most of their long lives here. For them, Nibiru is a distant legend, a story told by their elders. Earth is their home, and the humans are a familiar, if lesser, part of their daily existence. Boredom is a powerful motivator, even for beings with lifespans stretching for millennia. Some of these younger Anunnaki begin to take a more personal interest in the human population. The Sumerian king list, a fascinating historical document, lists kings who reigned for incredibly long periods before a great flood, and then shorter, more human-like reigns afterwards. This is often cited by alternative theorists as evidence of Anunnaki demigods or even Anunnaki themselves ruling directly over humans in the early days. This personal interest is where things get particularly interesting, and a little scandalous. The texts, including some interpretations of Genesis chapter 6, the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose, speak of the sons of the gods intermingling with human women. These unions, if they occurred, would have produced offspring, demigods, heroes of old, individuals who possessed a greater measure of Anunnaki vitality, intelligence, and perhaps even longevity than ordinary humans. Imagine the social complexities. These hybrid children wouldn't fully belong to either world. They would be living bridges, or perhaps walking points of contention between the divine and the mortal. This is a recurring theme in many mythologies worldwide. Heroes with one divine parent, like Gilgamesh himself, whose mother was said to be the goddess Nin's son. Historians still argue whether these tales of divine mortal unions are purely metaphorical, representing the merging of different cultures or social classes, or if they could reflect a more literal, albeit controversial, interpretation of ancient narratives. These interactions, whether sanctioned or illicit, would have had a profound impact on human society. They would have introduced new genetic lines, new talents, new ambitions. They would also have created jealousy, conflict, and social stratification. Some humans, favored by the Anunnaki or possessing Anunnaki heritage, might rise to positions of prominence, acting as intermediaries, foremen, or even proto-priests. Others would remain laborers, their lives unchanged, looking on with a mixture of envy and resentment. The Anunnaki are inadvertently creating a more complex and potentially more rebellious human society than they initially intended. They wanted simple workers. They're getting people with all the glorious and frustrating complexities that entails. The Anunnaki also continue to impart knowledge, but it's often selective, tailored to their needs. They teach humans astronomy, not for philosophical stargazing, but so they can track time, predict seasons for agriculture, and perhaps even assist in observing the movements of Nibiru. They introduce mathematics, not for the beauty of pure numbers, but for keeping records, for surveying land, for calculating yields. They establish laws. Enlil is often credited with being a stern lawgiver, not necessarily out of a deep concern for human justice, but to maintain order and productivity within the burgeoning human settlements. These are the MEs that the Sumerian texts speak of, tablets or decrees containing divine laws and knowledge, essential for the functioning of civilization. One quirky tidbit: some have speculated that the intricate knowledge of the movements of celestial bodies like Sirius, seemingly out of place for early civilizations, might be a leftover from Anunnaki teachings, as Sirius could have been an important navigational marker for them, or even related to Nibiru's long orbit. The humans, in turn, begin to develop their own interpretations of the Anunnaki. They see these powerful beings who live for immense periods, who wield incredible technologies, who can command the forces of nature, or so it seems, and they begin to worship them. The Anunnaki temples become true places of worship, where humans bring offerings, perform rituals, and seek favor from their divine masters. The Anunnaki likely tolerate, and perhaps even encourage, this worship. It's a useful tool for control, a way to reinforce their authority and ensure human compliance. It's easier to rule over adoring supplicants than over a resentful workforce constantly on the verge of another Igigi-style meltdown. All right, team, let's lean into this God thing. It seems to make them bring us more goats, and frankly, I'm tired of the replicators' idea of goat stew. But this deification also creates a distance. The Anunnaki become more remote, more enigmatic, their actions interpreted through a lens of myth and ritual. The direct, if often harsh, interactions of the early days give way to a more formalized relationship, mediated by priests and rulers chosen from among the humans. This period is a crucible, forging the foundations of human civilization, religion, and social structure, all under the often unwitting and sometimes self-serving guidance of gods who came from the stars looking for gold and ended up becoming the architects of a new race. The complexities are mounting, and the Anunnaki will soon find that their primitive workers are capable of far more than just digging. This human civilization, under the often reluctant tutelage of the Anunnaki, continues to develop and expand across the Mesopotamian plains and beyond. A new kind of tension begins to build. It's not just the old friction between master and servant, but something more atmospheric. The earth itself seems to be growing restless. You feel a change in the wind, a subtle shift in the patterns of rain and drought. The Anunnaki, with their advanced scientific understanding and their long-term perspective, having observed Earth over multiple Shars or 3,600-year Nibiruan orbits, become aware of an impending global catastrophe, a great deluge, a flood of epic proportions that will reshape the face of the planet. This isn't some localized flash flood. This is the big one, an event that will wipe the slate clean. The exact cause of this predicted deluge is a matter of debate even within the narrative. Some interpretations suggest it's a natural cyclical event, perhaps triggered by polar ice melt or massive tectonic shifts. Others, more controversially, hint that it might be connected to the gravitational influence of Nibiru itself during one of its periodic close passages through the inner solar system. Imagine their home planet, the very reason they are on Earth mining gold, inadvertently becoming the harbinger of destruction for their terrestrial operations. The irony would be thicker than Nibiruan engine oil. Historians still argue whether the numerous ancient flood myths found in cultures across the globe, from the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh to the story of Noah and Genesis, all stem from a single, massive prehistoric event or are independent responses to various local inundations. The Anunnaki Council convenes, the mood even more somber than during the Igigi rebellion. The data is undeniable. The waters are coming. The debate now is not if the flood will happen, but what to do about it, particularly regarding their human workforce. Enlil, ever the pragmatist and perhaps increasingly annoyed by humanity's burgeoning numbers, their noise, and their tendency to stray from a strictly functional path he envisioned for them, those pesky interminglings and unsanctioned philosophical ponderings, sees an opportunity. He argues for letting nature take its course. Let the flood wipe out humanity. They are becoming too numerous, too difficult to manage. Perhaps, he reasons, after the waters recede, the Anunnaki can start over, or simply continue their gold mining operations with robotic efficiency, unburdened by a dependent and increasingly independent-minded mortal population. He's basically suggesting a planetary Control-Alt-Delete for the human race. Enki, however, objects vehemently. He, more than any other Anunnaki, has a connection to humanity. He was instrumental in their creation, he has guided their development, however imperfectly, and he sees a spark of something valuable in them, something beyond mere servitude. To allow their complete destruction would be a monstrous waste, an act of cosmic negligence. He argues for saving a remnant of humanity, for preserving the seed of mankind. This creates a profound division within the Anunnaki leadership. The Sumerian Atrahasis epic details this divine disagreement with remarkable clarity. Enlil is angered by mankind's noise and decides to destroy them with a flood, while Enki, bound by an oath not to directly reveal the plan to humans, finds a clever way to warn his favorite human. The decision is made, largely swayed by Enlil's authority. Humanity will be allowed to perish. The Anunnaki will save themselves, taking to their skyships, their celestial boats, to ride out the cataclysm from orbit. They are instructed to keep the plan secret from the humans. No warnings. No assistance. Let them meet their fate. This is a dark moment for the Anunnaki, a decision that weighs heavily even on those who support it. It's one thing to create a species for labor. It's another to condemn it to extinction. But Enki, true to his often rebellious and compassionate nature, or perhaps just unwilling to see his grand genetic experiment go entirely down the drain, cannot abide by this decree. Bound by an oath not to directly inform humans, he resorts to a clever subterfuge. He speaks to a reed wall, knowing that his chosen human, a righteous and wise man named Utnapishtim, in the epic of Gilgamesh or Atrahasis in the epic bearing his name, the Sumerian Noah figure, is sleeping on the other side and will overhear. He instructs this man through the wall to dismantle his house and build a great boat, a submersible vessel, and to load it with his family, his craftsmen, and the seed of all living things. The instructions are specific. The dimensions of the boat, the need for waterproofing with bitumen, a plentiful resource in Mesopotamia, a geological fact that lends a touch of realism to the ancient tale. It's a classic whistleblower move, ancient alien style. Plus, read hot? Yeah, you. Tell the guy inside to build a really, really big boat. And don't skimp on the caulk. Trust me on this one. Utnapishtim, though bewildered, trusts the divine voice. He builds the ark, gathering his family and all necessary supplies, enduring the ridicule of his neighbors who cannot comprehend his actions. As the appointed day arrives, the skies darken ominously. The Anunnaki board their ships and ascend into the heavens, watching from above as the catastrophe unfolds. Then the floodgates of the sky and the deep open. Torrential rains lash down, the oceans surge, and a wall of water sweeps across the land, inundating everything. The human cities, the Anunnaki settlements, the mines, all are submerged. The noise of humanity, which so annoyed Enlil, is silenced. From their vantage point in orbit, even the Anunnaki are horrified by the scale of the destruction. The texts describe the gods themselves cowering, weeping at the devastation they have allowed, or in some interpretations unleashed. It's a stark image, powerful celestial beings, humbled by the raw fury of planetary forces, or perhaps by the consequences of their own internal conflicts and decisions. The waters rage for many days. When they finally begin to recede, the world below is transformed, a muddy, desolate wasteland. Utnapishtim's ark eventually comes to rest on a mountaintop. He releases birds to find dry land. Life, against all odds, has been preserved. One quirky, often overlooked detail in some flood narratives is the mention of the pitch or bitumen used to seal the ark. The extensive natural bitumen seeps in Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, made this material readily available and widely used in antiquity for waterproofing, construction, and even mummification in some cultures. The inclusion of such a specific, locally sourced material lends a curious air of authenticity to these ancient accounts. The Anunnaki, witnessing this from above, are divided in their reaction. Enlil is reportedly furious that humanity has survived, but Enki defends his actions, and eventually a new pact is made. Humanity will be allowed to continue, but perhaps under new terms, their lifespan shortened, their connection to the gods forever altered. The Great Deluge serves as a reset button, a terrifying chapter break in the story of gods and mortals on planet Earth. The waters of the Great Deluge finally recede, leaving behind a world scoured clean, a landscape of mud and debris where bustling cities and sprawling human settlements once stood. You can almost smell the damp earth, the scent of decay mixed with the faint, hopeful aroma of new growth already pushing through the silt. Utnapishtim, his family, and the creatures saved aboard his remarkable ark step out onto this transformed world, blinking in the unfamiliar sunlight, the silence almost deafening after the roar of the flood. From their orbiting spacecraft, the Anunnaki survey the devastation. Even Enlil, who had advocated for humanity's demise, is said to have been sobered by the sheer scale of the destruction. The Earth, their vital gold mining outpost, is a wreck. Their carefully constructed infrastructure, the mines in the Abzu, the processing plants in Mesopotamia, their own cities like Eridu and Nippur, all severely damaged or wiped out. It's a colossal mess, and the cleanup job looks daunting even for beings with advanced technology. Starting over is going to be even more work than dealing with noisy humans. The Anunnaki descend once more, their ships landing on the newly shaped terrain. There's a sense of grim determination. The mission to acquire gold for Nibiru must continue. Their homeworld's atmospheric crisis hasn't magically resolved itself during Earth's aquatic adventure. But things are different now. Humanity, though drastically reduced in number, has proven its resilience, its will to survive, thanks in no small part to Enki's clandestine intervention. A new accord is reached among the Anunnaki leaders. Humanity will be allowed to flourish again, but under a new set of rules. The old, relatively direct oversight is deemed too problematic, too prone to the kinds of issues, like those pesky divine mortal liaisons and the general noise of a burgeoning population that had so irritated Enlil. The solution? Kingship. The Anunnaki decide to delegate the day-to-day governance of humanity to human rulers, individuals chosen and sanctioned by the gods themselves. Kingship was lowered from heaven, as the Sumerian king list famously states. This establishes a buffer, a hierarchical system where the Anunnaki can rule indirectly, issuing decrees and receiving tribute through a line of divinely appointed kings. These first post-Diluvian rulers are tasked with reorganizing human society, rebuilding the cities, and crucially, ensuring that the labor and resources required by the Anunnaki continue to flow. It's a classic middle management strategy, implemented on a planetary scale. All right, Utnapishtim, you did a good job with the boat thing. How do you like a promotion? You get a pointy hat and get to tell everyone else what to do. Just make sure the gold shipments are on time. You witness the painstaking process of rebuilding. The survivors, guided by Utnapishtim, who is granted a form of immortality and becomes a revered sage, living in a remote land called Dilmun, a paradise-like place often identified by scholars with modern-day Bahrain, known for its ancient burial mounds and freshwater springs, a mainstream historical fact. New cities rise from the mud, often built on the sites of their antediluvian predecessors, their names echoing the past: Kish, Uruk, Ur. The focus is on re-establishing agriculture, rebuilding irrigation systems, and creating a stable social order. The Anunnaki provide guidance, technology, and the overarching framework of civilization, DMEs. Those divine blueprints for society are reintroduced or perhaps refined for this new era. The relationship between humans and their gods becomes more formalized, more ritualized. Temples are rebuilt, grander than before, serving as administrative centers, storehouses, and the dwelling places of the gods when they choose to reside among mortals. A priesthood emerges, dedicated to serving the Anunnaki, interpreting their will, and conducting the elaborate rituals designed to ensure their favor and the continued prosperity of the land. Humans no longer have the relatively free and easy access to the Anunnaki that characterized some of the earlier periods. The gods are more remote, more awe-inspiring, their presence felt through their chosen intermediaries, the kings and priests. Historians still argue whether the concept of sacred kingship in early civilizations was a political tool to legitimize power, or if it genuinely reflected a widespread belief in the divine mandate of rulers. This new system, while perhaps more efficient from the Anunnaki perspective, also sows the seeds for future human autonomy. By entrusting humans with governance, the Anunnaki are inadvertently fostering leadership skills, administrative capabilities, and a sense of collective identity among the mortal population. The kings, while nominally servants of the gods, begin to wield real power, commanding armies, collecting taxes, and managing the affairs of their burgeoning city-states. The Sumerian civilization, which blossoms in Mesopotamia during this post-Diluvian period, becomes a vibrant tapestry of interconnected and often competing urban centers, each with its own patron deity, one of the Anunnaki, and its own royal dynasty. One quirky tidbit from this era is the sheer longevity attributed to the early post-Diluvian kings in the Sumerian king list. While not as astronomical as the pre-flood rulers, figures like Etna of Kish, who ascended to heaven, perhaps a garbled account of a trip in an Anunnaki skyship, are still credited with reigns lasting hundreds of years. This gradually decreases to more recognizably human lifespans as the list progresses, perhaps indicating a waning direct Anunnaki influence or a gradual humanization of the ruling lines. The gold mining operations are eventually re-established, though perhaps on a modified scale or with different methods. The focus for humanity shifts somewhat from direct mass labor in the mines, though this likely continues in some form, to providing the agricultural surplus, the processed goods, and the general logistical support required by the Anunnaki. Human society becomes more diversified, with farmers, craftsmen, scribes, soldiers, priests, and rulers all playing their part in this divinely ordained cosmic enterprise. The Anunnaki, having weathered the flood and re-established their earthly operations, can once again focus on the vital task of saving Nibiru. But the world they rule over is changing. Humanity is no longer a simple, freshly minted creation. It has a history, a memory of destruction and survival, and a growing capacity for independent thought and action. The reset of the Great Deluge has cleared the board, but the new game being played has even more complex rules and far higher stakes for the future of both gods and mortals. The post-Diluvian world settles into a new rhythm, a complex dance between the distant, overseeing Anunnaki and the burgeoning human city-states they govern through divinely appointed kings. For a long while, this system seems to work, at least from the Anunnaki perspective. The gold, or its equivalent in processed resources and terrestrial tribute, continues to flow towards Nibiru, hopefully replenishing its ailing atmosphere. Human civilization flourishes in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and eventually other parts of the world, developing intricate cultures, religions, and technologies, all under the subtle, and sometimes not so subtle influence of their celestial progenitors. But even among gods, harmony is a fragile thing. You are now sensing a different kind of tremor, not from the earth, but from within the ranks of the Anunnaki themselves. Old rivalries, differing philosophies, and perhaps sheer cosmic boredom begin to create rifts in their united front. The two most prominent figures in this unfolding drama are, as often before, Enki and Enlil. These half-brothers, with their contrasting personalities and approaches to managing Earth and its human population, have always had a strained relationship. Enki, the scientist, the creator of mankind, often seen as more sympathetic to his creations, a god of wisdom and water. Enlil, the commander, the enforcer of rules, the god of air and storms, often more concerned with order, discipline, and maintaining the Anunnaki's superior status. Their disagreements, which had simmered over issues like the Igigi rebellion and the decision to allow or prevent humanity's survival during the Great Deluge, now begin to escalate into more overt conflicts. It's like a celestial family feud, but instead of fighting over the TV remote, they're squabbling over the destiny of planets and the loyalty of entire civilizations. Think of it as a divine reality show, keeping up with the Nibiruans, only with slightly higher stakes and considerably more advanced weaponry. These internal Anunnaki conflicts are often played out through their human proxies. The city-states of Sumer, each dedicated to a particular Anunnaki deity, frequently warred with one another. For instance, Lagash, patronized by Ningirsu, Enlil's son, and Umma fought a long-running border dispute over fertile agricultural land, a well-documented historical conflict from the early dynastic period of Sumer. Historians still argue whether these intercity conflicts were purely human political struggles over resources and territory, or if they were, as the myths often suggest, earthly reflections of power struggles and rivalries within the divine pantheon. Were the human kings merely pawns in the larger game being played by their celestial masters? The texts certainly paint a picture of gods taking sides, backing their favored cities and rulers, and even directly intervening in human battles. As generations pass, even for the long-lived Anunnaki, circumstances change. Perhaps the gold mining operations become less critical as new solutions for Nibiru's atmospheric problems are found, or maybe the accessible reserves on Earth are finally depleted. Or perhaps, after millennia on Earth, some Anunnaki simply grow weary of their long exile. The initial urgent mission has evolved into a protracted stay, and the ties that bind them to Nibiru might be loosening for some, while for others, the desire to return home or to see their primary mission fully completed remains paramount. This divergence in priorities would inevitably lead to friction. Moreover, humanity itself is becoming less pliable, less easily controlled. The gifts of civilization, writing, mathematics, governance have empowered them. Human kings, while still acknowledging their divine overlords, begin to assert more independence. Philosophers and thinkers emerge, questioning the established order, pondering the nature of gods and mortals. The simple master-servant relationship is irrevocably altered. The Anunnaki are facing a classic case of the student surpassing the teacher, or at least, the student starting to ask really awkward questions and demanding a say in the curriculum. One particularly contentious issue, hinted at in various myths and esoteric interpretations, is the use of advanced weaponry during these pantheon wars. Tales of gods battling in the skies, wielding weapons of immense destructive power, Vimanas in Hindu texts, or the tablets of destinies in Mesopotamian myth which granted supreme authority and devastating power to their possessor, are sometimes cited as evidence of these divine conflicts. The destruction of certain ancient cities like Sodom and Gomorrah in the biblical narrative, or Mohenjo-daro in the Indus Valley, where some fringe theories suggest evidence of vitrification due to extreme heat, is occasionally attributed to such God-on-God or God-on-human warfare. This is, of course, highly speculative, but it paints a dramatic picture of Anunnaki disagreements escalating beyond mere shouting matches. Right, Enlil, you want to settle this? My celestial death ray against your atmospheric disruptor. Loser buys the next round of ambrosia. Eventually, a decision, or perhaps a series of decisions, is made for the Anunnaki to begin a phased withdrawal from direct involvement in earthly affairs. This isn't a sudden disappearance, but a gradual retreat. Key Anunnaki figures ascend to heaven, returning to Nibiru or perhaps moving to other outposts. The day-to-day governance of Earth is left increasingly in the hands of human rulers and the established priesthoods. The direct, physical presence of the gods becomes rarer, replaced by visions, omens, and messages delivered through intermediaries. One quirky tidbit: some theorists connect the rise of monotheistic tendencies in certain cultures with this Anunnaki withdrawal, suggesting that as the multitude of local gods departed, the concept of a single, supreme, and more distant deity became more prominent. The parting is not necessarily amicable or complete. Some Anunnaki might choose to remain, perhaps integrating more fully and discreetly into human society, or watching from afar. Others leave with dire warnings and prophecies about humanity's future conduct. The legacy they leave behind is immense and complex. A human race uplifted from its primitive origins, a planet dotted with the ruins of their cities and mines, and a tapestry of myths and religions that will carry the distorted echoes of their presence for millennia to come. The era of gods walking among mortals is drawing to a close, but their influence is indelibly imprinted on the human story. The children are being left to manage the nursery, and it remains to be seen if they will thrive or burn the place down. As the Anunnaki gradually withdraw from direct, overt management of earthly affairs, their towering figures and extraordinary deeds don't just vanish into thin air. Instead, they recede into the realm of legend, their histories becoming the bedrock of human mythology, their attributes and actions shaping the pantheons of gods worshipped by nascent civilizations across the globe. You are now sifting through the sands of time, examining the broken pottery shards of ancient stories, trying to piece together the faded image of these celestial visitors from the tales humanity told itself once the gods were no longer holding daily office hours in Mesopotamia or the Nile Valley. It's like trying to reconstruct a complex machine from a few scattered blueprints and a lot of hearsay from people who only saw it glinting in the sun from a distance. The most direct echoes, of course, are found in Mesopotamia itself. The Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians all worshipped the pantheon of gods Anu, Enlil, Enki, Inanna, Ishtar, Marduk, Ashur, whose names, characteristics, and family relationships bear a striking resemblance to the Anunnaki figures we've been discussing. The cuneiform tablets, diligently translated by scholars, are replete with stories of these deities, their councils, their rivalries, their creative acts, their decrees, and their interactions with humanity. The Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic, details Marduk's rise to supremacy after defeating the chaotic Tiamat, a tale that some see as an allegory for a later Anunnaki power struggle or a shift in their leadership structure on Earth. This isn't fringe. The study of these texts is a core component of Assyriology and ancient history. The connection is explicit in the names themselves. Anunna or Anunnaki are the terms used in these texts for the collective deities or the great gods. But the echoes don't stop at the borders of Mesopotamia. As human populations migrated, as cultures interacted through trade and conquest, these foundational stories traveled, adapted, and transformed. Consider the ancient Egyptian pantheon. Ra, the sun god, sailing his celestial boat across the sky. Does this not resonate with the Anunnaki and their sky ships, or perhaps even Nibiru itself, the wandering star? Osiris, the god of the afterlife and rebirth, dismembered and then reassembled. Could this be a distorted memory of Anunnaki medical prowess, or perhaps a tale of a fallen and resurrected leader? Isis, the powerful goddess of magic and motherhood, echoes of Ninhursag, the geneticist and birth goddess? The parallels are often striking, not necessarily in direct name-for-name correspondence, but in the roles, attributes, and narratives associated with these divine figures. Historians still argue whether the similarities between geographically distant pantheons are due to direct cultural diffusion, independent yet parallel development of archetypal figures, or a shared ancient substratum of proto-mythology. Move further afield to ancient Greece. Zeus, king of the gods on Mount Olympus, wielding his thunderbolt, his contentious family of divine siblings and offspring. It's not hard to see parallels with Enlil, Anu, and the often squabbling Anunnaki Council. Prometheus, the titan who defied Zeus to give fire, knowledge, to humanity, and was severely punished for it. Could this be a garbled memory of Enki, or another benevolent Anunnaki, imparting forbidden wisdom to the Lulu, much to the chagrin of the more conservative faction? The battles between the Olympian gods and the Titans, a war between older and younger generations of deities for control of the cosmos. Does this not echo the potential pantheon wars among the Anunnaki, or perhaps even the Igigi rebellion? Even in the Indus Valley civilization, with its enigmatic seals and yet to be fully deciphered script, there are hints. Figures that some interpret as Proto-Shiva, seated in yogic postures, surrounded by animals, suggest a complex religious system that might share common roots or influences. The Hindu Vedas, composed much later but drawing on ancient oral traditions, speak of gods, devas, and anti-gods, asuras, of flying chariots, vimanas, and devastating celestial weapons, brahmastras. While these are rich and complex traditions in their own right, it's tempting for those exploring the Anunnaki hypothesis to see Nibiru in fingerprints. One quirky tidbit often cited is the detailed descriptions of vimanas in texts like the Vaimanika Shastra, though its ancient origins are debated by mainstream scholars, which describe various types of flying machines with capabilities far beyond what ancient India is conventionally credited with. Across the Atlantic, in the Americas, the feathered serpent god Quetzalcoatl, Kukulkan to the Maya, is a prominent figure, a bringer of civilization, knowledge, and laws, who arrived from the sea and promised to return. A bearded, fair-skinned deity in some accounts, could this be a memory of an Anunnaki visitor, distinct from the local population, whose arrival and departure left an indelible mark on Mesoamerican cultures? The intricate astronomical knowledge of the Maya, their complex calendar systems, were these purely indigenous developments, or were they influenced by an external, advanced source, as some propose? These lingering echoes are not proof, of course. They are tantalizing threads, suggestive patterns in the vast tapestry of human mythology. The human imagination is a powerful thing, capable of conjuring gods and monsters from the forces of nature, the depths of the psyche, and the dynamics of society. Yet, the consistency of certain themes, gods descending from the sky, bringing knowledge, creating humanity for labor, divine conflicts, great floods, and promises of return, across disparate and often disconnected cultures is undeniably intriguing. It's as if humanity, in its infancy, witnessed something extraordinary, something so profound that it became woven into our collective unconscious, remembered and retold in 1,000 different ways, the details blurring and shifting with each retelling, like a dream half remembered upon waking. The Anunnaki may have physically departed, or at least stepped back from the limelight, but their story, our story of them, continues to resonate in the oldest tales we tell, and so you find yourself at the edge of the story, or perhaps at the edge of a new beginning, looking back at the millennia of human history that has unfolded since the Anunnaki's gradual withdrawal and forward into a future that still holds the faint, persistent echo of their potential return. The gold has been mined, civilizations have risen and fallen, and humanity, the once primitive worker, now stands on the cusp of its own interstellar journeys, perhaps unknowingly following in the celestial footsteps of its alleged creators. The question that hangs in the dim pre-dawn light of our modern understanding is, what became of Nibiru, and will its fabled return ever come to pass? The narrative we've explored, drawn from Zacharias Sitchin's interpretations of Sumerian texts and other ancient sources, posits that Nibiru is not just a mythological construct but a physical planet, the 12th planet, counting the Sun, Moon, and the then-known planets in our solar system, with a vast, elliptical 3,600 Earth-year orbit. This orbit, according to the theory, periodically brings Nibiru into the inner solar system, causing potential gravitational disruptions and, crucially, allowing for interaction between its inhabitants and ours. The entire premise of the Anunnaki mission to Earth was driven by Nibiru's atmospheric crisis, a problem they hoped to solve with Earth's gold. Did they succeed? Did the shipments of refined gold, painstakingly extracted by the Igigi and then by the Lulu, manage to stabilize Nibiru's failing shield? The myths don't give a clear quarterly report on Nibiruan atmospheric particulate density. If they did succeed, then Nibiru presumably continued on its long journey out into the cold depths of space, its inhabitants perhaps breathing a collective sigh of relief, their world saved for now. Their interactions with Earth would then become a closed chapter, a historical mission logged in their vast archives. But what if the fix was only temporary? What if Nibiru's atmospheric problems are chronic, requiring periodic replenishment? This line of thought opens the door to the more sensational aspect of the Nibiru story, its prophesied return. Many who subscribe to this theory look for signs, for astronomical anomalies, for ancient prophecies that might herald Nibiru's next passage. The internet, as you might imagine, is a fertile ground for such speculations, with countless theories about Planet X or Wormwood, from the Book of Revelation, being equated with Nibiru. This is where the theory moves firmly from historical interpretation, however alternative, into the realm of modern eschatology and, for many mainstream scientists, pseudoscience. The search for a hypothetical Planet 9 in the outer solar system, a legitimate astronomical endeavor based on observed gravitational perturbations of trans-Neptunian objects, has unfortunately been co-opted by some Nibiru enthusiasts, much to the chagrin of the astronomers involved. Yeah, we're looking for a large, distant planet. No, it's probably not full of gold-obsessed ancient astronauts with family drama issues. Next question. Historians still argue whether ancient astronomical observations, particularly those from Mesopotamia with their sophisticated mathematical astronomy, could have detected or predicted the passage of a large, rogue celestial body, or if their wandering stars were confined to the known planets. The Sumerians were meticulous observers of the heavens. Their entire religious and agricultural calendar was based on celestial cycles. If a massive planet like Nibiru did indeed pass through the inner solar system every 3,600 years, it's plausible they would have recorded it, perhaps encoding its appearance in their myths as a celestial omen or the return of a great god. The idea of Nibiru's return carries both a promise and a threat. For some, it signifies the return of our creators, a chance for new revelations, perhaps even a technological or spiritual upliftment. For others, it's a harbinger of doom, a celestial wrecking ball whose gravitational influence could trigger earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and another great deluge, a kind of cosmic housekeeping that humanity might not survive. This duality reflects the Anunnaki themselves, who were both creators and destroyers, benefactors and taskmasters. One quirky and rather persistent tidbit in the Nibiru lore is its association with various doomsday predictions, none of which, thankfully, have come to pass. From the 2003 alignment claims to the 2012 Mayan calendar scare, Nibiru has been a recurring character in apocalyptic prophecies. This has, understandably, led to widespread skepticism and ridicule from the scientific community, who point out the lack of any credible astronomical evidence for such a planet on such an imminent collision course or disruptive flyby. If a planet-sized body were truly headed for the inner solar system in the near future, its gravitational effects would already be easily detectable, and it would be one of the brightest objects in the sky. So, is Nibiru out there? Will the Anunnaki return? The story, as a historical or even pseudo-historical narrative, largely concludes with their departure and the lingering echoes in myth. What remains is belief, speculation, and the enduring human fascination with our origins and our place in the cosmos. Perhaps the Anunnaki, if they ever existed, fulfilled their mission, saved their world, and moved on, leaving humanity as their most complex and perhaps most troublesome legacy. Or perhaps they are still out there on their long Nibiruan year, occasionally checking in on their Earth project with a mixture of pride, exasperation, and scientific curiosity. Maybe they're just waiting for us to invent decent interstellar coffee before they bother with another visit. The truth, as always, is elusive, hidden behind the veil of millennia, obscured by layers of myth and misinterpretation. But the story of the Anunnaki, of gods from planet Nibiru who allegedly engineered humanity for gold, serves as a powerful, if unconventional, lens through which to examine our deepest questions about who we are, where we came from, and whether we are truly alone in the vast, silent universe. It's a story that challenges our assumptions, sparks our imagination, and reminds us that the line between myth and history can sometimes be as thin and shimmering as an Nibiruan atmospheric shield. The final decision, to believe or to dismiss, rests with you, as you drift from this tale into the realm of your own dreams. Whether Nibiru is a tangible world or a metaphor for distant, powerful forces that shaped our destiny, its story has certainly left its mark. Institute of Cell Biology and Genetics, they identified a genetic mutation that triggered the faster creation of neurons in the Homo sapien brain. The gene is known as TKTL1. Other hominids also had this gene, including the Unduls, but they all differ from the modern human gene by one amino acid. This small change wouldn't come from crossbreeding or years of evolution. The only time we see a single gene altered this, specifically, is when that gene is targeted and manipulated with technology. With genetic engineering, by altering this one gene, Homo sapiens are able to grow neurons much faster than any other Homo species, faster by far. For 300,000 years, Homo sapiens didn't change much. They didn't invent or innovate. In fact, Neanderthals were the dominant species on Earth up until about 50,000 years ago. Then something happened. Men suddenly started to create, reason, and invent within a few generations. Neanderthals were wiped out and Homo sapiens conquered the world, and our species has been rapidly advancing ever since. That gene TKL1, with just a tiny tweak, acted like a turbo switch in our minds and made us who we are today. Now, you may not believe in the Anunnaki, but you still have to wonder who flipped the switch. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. My name is AJ, that silly fish. Yeah, New York Anunnaki. Are you happy we finally did an Anunnaki episode? And it was a long one. It could have been longer. She said, nice. This has been the Y-Files. Now, if you had fun or learned anything, do him a favor, like, subscribe, comment. Share. That stuff really makes his fins wiggle. Like most topics we cover on the channel, today's was recommended by you, by thousands of you. So if there's a story you'd like to see or learn more about, go to the wfiles.com. Tips: remember, the Y-Files is also a podcast twice a week. I post deep dives into the stories we cover here on the channel. I also post episodes that would not be allowed in the channel. It's called the Y-Files Operation Podcast, and it's available everywhere you get your podcast. Now, if you need more Y-Files in your life, and not everybody does, but if you do, check out our Discord. There are tens of thousands of people on. They're 24/7, and they talk about the same weird stuff that we do. It's a great community. It's a lot of fun, and it's free to join now. If you want to know what's going on with the Y-Files, check out our production calendar. It's at the yfiles.com calendar. We post our episodes, schedule up podcasts, live streams, meetups, everything now. Special thanks to our patrons who make this channel possible. Every episode of the Y-Files is dedicated to our Patreon members. Without you, there'd be no Y-Files. I can't thank you enough for your generous support, and I mean that. Now, if you like to support the channel, consider becoming a member on Patreon. For as little as $3 a month, you get access to perks like videos early with no commercials, access to merch only available to members, plus you get 2 private live streams every week just for you with both our cameras are on. It's a lot of fun. Another great way to support the channel is grab something from the Wi-Fi store. Grab a Heck of His t-shirt or a Fistal coffee mug, or a shirt with my face on it, or a mug with my face on it, or a backpack with my face on it, or a mouse pad with my face on it, or a stepladder with my face. My face is on everything. Or just get one of these squeezy stuffed animal talking fish toy dose. Those are the plugs, and that's going to do it. Until next time, be safe, be kind, know that you are appreciated. It's good to be music. Back, yeah, I play Be a Scare of 51, a secret code inside the Bible said I love my UE and paranormal fun as well as music, so I'm singing like I should, but then another conspiracy theory becomes the truth, my friends, and it never ends. No, it never. Music ends. I feel the crap cat. I got stuck inside M's home with MK True, I being only to music. I did Stanley Curry fake the moon landing alone on a film set with the shadow people there throughout. Well, aliens get fought the smiling man, I'm told, and his name was Cold. I can't. I'm dancing with the fish eye this night. Wednesday J. Went to the night. All I ever wanted was to just see the truth. So the one all through the night, them TH man, Sid and the solar storm still come to got to the secret city underground mysterious number stations planets CLE to project Stargate. and where the Dark Watcher's music. Found a simulation, don't you, wore the black K and Satel lighted to me. So I can't believe I'm dancing with a fish, heck fish on Thursday nights with AJ through the night. All I ever wanted was to just hear the truth. So feed all through night fish on Thursday nights when they jay you, and all I ever want to just give the truth on the fringes of human thought, a celestial what if whispered down through the ages. And so, as our journey through the ages, from the fading light of distant Nibiru to the nascent civilizations of Earth, draws to a close, the grand sweeping narrative of the Anunnaki begins to soften, its sharp edges blurring into the gentle landscape of approaching sleep. The echoes of their mighty deeds, the clamor of their celestial politics, and the immense weight of their cosmic burdens fade into a quieter, more personal space within your thoughts. The fate of planets and the genesis of humankind now recede, allowing the simpler, more immediate comforts of your present surroundings to reassert themselves. Perhaps the tale has stirred questions, or perhaps it has merely provided a backdrop for the mind to wander as drowsiness deepens. Whatever its effect, let the story now settle, like fine gold dust settling in the still air of a long-abandoned Nibiruan mine. There are no more demands from stern commanders, no more desperate calculations to save a dying world, only the gentle cadence of your own breathing, the soft embrace of your bed. The mysteries of Nibiru, the debates of scholars, the truth or fiction of it all, can wait for the morning light. Tonight, you were an observer of epochs, a silent witness to creation and catastrophe, to toil and to triumph. Now release that grand perspective. Let the vastness of space and time contract to the peaceful confines of your room. The stars outside your window, whether they hide a wandering planet or not, continue their silent, ageless dance, indifferent to the stories we tell beneath them. Allow their distant light to be a comfort, yet one in which your own small, warm presence is a precious and unique spark. Let the narrative threads loosen, the imagery dissolve, and sink now into the deep, restorative well of sleep, carrying with you only the quiet hum of a story told and the promise of sweet dreams. Thank you for your attention. Goodbye, and see you again in the next stories.